Hi, this video will help you learn about Operation Floodgate and how to navigate its main healing challenges. The first notable trash mob in the dungeon is the Shreddinator. He casts Shreddation, spawning saw blades on the ground, dealing very high damage to anyone foolish enough to stand in them. Monitor the Shreddation cast on the nameplate and start moving laterally before the cast finishes. If done correctly, you will not take any damage from Shreddation. The Shreddinator also has a frontal cone attack in Flamethrower, so don't stand in front of it. All of the Shreddinator's damage is technically avoidable, but what you'll find as a healer in Pugs is that people manage to get hit anyway. Have your healing cooldowns ready for anyone failing the mechanic, but don't blame yourself if they die. Apart from the Shreddinators, the more dangerous enemies to look out for in the first area of the dungeon are the Venture Company's Surveyors, who throw dynamite at random players, dealing high amounts of single target damage. Especially on high key levels, people can get one shot when targeted by two of them at the same time. They also cast Surveying Beam, which channels a beam of fire at a target and deals very high damage. However, the Surveying Beam can be interrupted, and its damage can also be avoided by moving while it is channeling onto you. That is, if you can move, because some pulls include both surveyors as well as Venture Company Architects, who cast Nailgun at random targets, rooting them in place and applying a high damage bleed. When a target rooted by Nailgun is also targeted by the Surveying Beam, they will likely die unless you react quickly with externals like Pain Suppression or Life Cocoon, or just an unholy amount of healing. Or, of course, someone interrupts the Surveying Beam cast. Finally, these pulls also include Loader Bots, who cast Wind Up and start spinning in a small circle, dealing damage to all players near them. In Pugs, expect melee players to absolutely eat some wind-up damage. The first boss in the dungeon is Big M.O.M.M.A, who is surrounded by 4 Dark Fuse mecha drones. The goal of the fight is to kill the mecha drones quickly. They will shoot random targets for a low amount of damage, as well as cast Maximum Distortion, which must be interrupted because it deals very high pulsing AoE damage if it is not. They also cast Doom Storm, targeting a random player and flying toward them. To help your team kill the drones quickly, try to bait the storms across the short plane of the room, not the long one. Big M.O.M.M.A also frequently casts Electro Crush on the tank, dealing a moderate amount of damage and also some damage over time. Usually I have found the tanks deal with this rather well, and the healing requirement is not very high. However, you should have an eye on the tank, just in case. Also, she will target a player with Sonic Boom, dealing high damage to anyone who gets hit by the disc as well as silencing them. When you are targeted by Sonic Boom, move away from the boss, apply a movement speed buff to yourself if you have one, and move laterally to avoid getting hit. However, try to start moving only when the cast finishes to make sure that none of your teammates are caught off guard by you changing the direction that Sonic Boom is aimed at. While the mecha drones are alive, there's usually not much to heal, so focus on dealing damage to assist your team in killing the drones. If your group fails to kill the drones quickly, Big M.O.M.M.A will apply Kill O Block Barrier to herself, reducing her damage taken by 80% and also dealing a moderate amount of pulsing AoE damage to your entire party. This can be very dangerous, because as soon as the drones are dead, she will then begin casting Jump Start, pulsing a very high amount of AoE damage onto all players for 12 seconds. Make sure to monitor the HP of the drones diligently and start ramping up your healing before they die, as it can be easy to fall behind when Jumpstart hits you unprepared and you still need a couple of global cooldowns to set up your big heals. Generally, one healing cooldown is required to heal through Jumpstart, so feel free to use a cooldown during this phase. When Jumpstart finishes, Big M.O.M.M.A will leave behind an expanding puddle of electricity on the ground, permanently denying that space of the boss arena for the rest of the fight. So Begin the fight at the edge of the room, not in the middle like a lost tourist. After the jumpstart cast is over, the boss then resummons the mecha drones and the cycle repeats until she is dead. After Big M.O.M.M.A, there is one more notable enemy in the Blood Warper. One of the Blood Warpers is usually pulled immediately after the boss fight, so if at all possible, do not blow all of your healing cooldowns on Big M.O.M.M.A because you may need them for the Blood Warpers. The Blood Warpers cast Warp Blood, surprise, I know, dealing a moderate amount of damage to all party members but also applying the same amount as a healing absorb. As a result, the cast deals massive damage to your entire group and will usually need a healing CD to power through one Blood Warp cast. Expect that each Blood Warper casts 2 times if your party does okay damage. As you will need to pull 2 Warpers after Big M.O.M.M.A, that makes for a total of 4 big AoE events you need to plan for. Many groups choose to Bloodlust the second Warper, which makes that fight somewhat easier. Whatever the strategy is, monitor your cooldowns carefully and plan in advance which one you will use for the next Blood Warp cast. After you then fly down with the kite, there's more of the same with Shredders, Architects and Surveyors. Some tanks might pull Bombshell Crabs as well, which explode when they die, applying a damage over time effect to the group. However, it's not overly dangerous unless too many of them are pulled and they die at the same time. The second boss is the Demolition Duo. It is one of the easier fights, but does have some challenges as well. As the main mechanic of the fight, Kiza will cast Big Bada Boom, planting 6 bombs at random locations in the room. The bombs must be destroyed before their timer runs out. This can be done in 2 ways. First, Kiza will cast Kinetic Explosive Gel on one player, which you need to dispel when they are near one or multiple bombs. Careful though, the gel deals a very high amount of ticking damage and also hurts a lot when it is dispelled. If your target is low, apply an external cooldown before you dispel them. Second, Bront targets random non-tank players with Barreling Charge, which needs to be aimed at the remaining bombs, which will then be destroyed when he runs through them. Careful though, getting hit by the charge may kill you. You have 5 opportunities to clear the bombs: gel, charge, 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 and another gel. Because you can clear multiple bombs with these abilities, this usually leaves some redundancy. As a result, the last gel is often not needed and you can dispel it instantly. However, be careful to look around the room once before you do so, just to make sure that all bombs are really gone. If the group ever fails to clear all bombs, not all is lost. If everyone is at full HP, and especially if a group-wide damage reduction is applied, you will survive it, at least on key levels below 16, 17, 18. Note also that you can run through the bombs. They do not explode when you walk into them, so you don't have to navigate around them as a movement restriction. Over the duration of the entire fight, Kiza will cast Quick Shot at random players, dealing a moderate amount of damage. This is where the real danger of the fight lies. Monitor your party's HP closely and quickly heal the target that gets hit. It's not super challenging on lower keys, but will get very difficult at higher key levels when Quickshot deals more than 50% of damage to a player's HP, as being targeted twice in a row will then be potentially lethal. However, in my experience, at or below level 15, this is not really an issue. Finally, the bosses need to die at the same time. If that is not managed, it is better to kill Kiza slightly before Bront, whose tank hit will then get successively stronger, but he can usually be played safely for like 20 to 30 seconds. 2 new trash mobs enter the scene after this fight. First, some routes include the Venture Company Divers, who plant Seaphorium charges on the ground and cast Harpoon. Harpoon can be interrupted, but if it does go through, it applies a medium to high damage bleed to the target and hooks them toward the diver. Be careful to position yourself in such a way that you will not get hooked into a planted Seaphorium charge. Overall, however, these diver pulls are not particularly challenging. You will also have to fight a pack of disturbed kelps, who apply a heal to themselves in restorative algae, but the cast can be interrupted and the buff can be purged. They also cast Jettison Kelp, which deals a high amount of AoE damage and must be CC'd, otherwise it can potentially wipe the group. You may be tempted to hold on to your healing cooldowns because of the upcoming boss fight. However, if you see that the pack is not properly controlled, you must be willing to use them, or your party will likely die. From this point forward, the healing challenges of this dungeon kick into high gear. First up is Swampface, who doesn't just look bad, he is bad. When pulled, he applies Razor Choke vines to your teammates, but not to yourself. The vines damage all of your team members throughout the entire fight, requiring a moderate amount of healing. The vines also bind players in packs of 2, snapping them back together if they move too far apart. As a healer, you will not have to deal with this. However, if a player dies and there's only 4 of you remaining, then you will have to play this mechanic as well. The boss will also cast Mudslide, which is a frontal that needs to be moved out of. The usual strategy in pugs is to always move clockwise. At regular intervals, Swampface casts Awaken the Swamp, dealing a high amount of damage to your entire party over 4 seconds, and spawning water waves that need to be dodged. However, if you get hit by one of the water waves, it's usually not a one-shot. Don't ask me how I know. The Awaken the Swamp phase is the main challenge of the fight, and you should make sure to have your main group healing spell available as well as be ready to commit 1 additional cooldown during this phase. Start by using your shorter cooldowns first, because they will rotate back and become available at the end of the fight, which usually lasts between 2 and 3 minutes. Use your longer cooldowns in the middle of the fight. Finally, the boss casts Sludge Claws on the tank after Awaken the Swamp ends, which deals a ton of damage, but I have found it to be a non-issue because the tank does not really take any other damage during the fight. Next, Bubbles has 3 abilities. The group should stack for Bubble Burp, because the arena is very small and you don't want bubbles floating around everywhere. The mini-boss then casts a frontal attack, which you need to move out of, and then he applies a big damage over time effect to all players with Backwash. Ramp up your healing before Backwash happens, and don't be afraid to use your healing cooldowns here, especially because the next trash pull is relatively easy. In the rest of the underground area, you will have to deal with the electricians, who apply overcharge to a random player, which needs to be dispelled. Make sure to dispel it quickly, because the debuff goes out frequently, and being slow on your dispels can make you fall behind. If overcharge expires without being dispelled, the target will be stunned for 6 seconds. Finally, the more dangerous mobs down here are the Dark Fuse Jumpstarters, especially when you fight 2 of them at the same time before the last boss. Their battery discharge pulses a high amount of AoE damage onto the entire party and requires you to move out of the electric puddles on the ground. Although the jump starters are certainly a challenge, if you manage to get past Swampface and Bubbles, you will probably be fine here. What can be challenging though, is that you might come into the fight starved for cooldowns and or mana, depending on how the previous encounters went. If you still have plenty of time in the key, don't be afraid to ask the tank for a short mana break. The end boss can also be rather difficult. Be especially wary of his first turbocharge cast. When playing with pugs, it happens quite often that the tank awkwardly chains the jumpstarter pack onto the boss and the group is not at full HP when he is pulled. However, the boss will immediately go into his turbocharge AoE when he is pulled. Be on your toes after the jumpstarters die and be ready to heal another large AoE event right away. If you have any cooldowns left, the first turbocharge is a good point to be pressing them, because others will rotate back during the fight and it is important to stabilize the encounter at the beginning. After casting turbocharge, the boss will drop a bunch of water puddles from the ceiling, which you can freely walk through without taking any damage, and you can also stand in the ground effect when they drop. Nothing associated with the water casts deal any damage to you. However, you do not want to linger near the water, because the boss will also cast Gigazap on 2 targets, electrifying any water puddles in an area around these targets. Gigazap deals a moderate amount of initial damage and applies a damage over time effect. This can actually be quite challenging to heal if your teammates don't use their defensives properly. Be ready to commit externals such as Pain Suppression or Life Cocoon to heal through this damage. Next, each player will get a leaping spark spawning near them, which needs to be kited into a non-electrified water puddle. It then disappears, electrifying the water in the process. walking into electrified water will stun you and kill you, so be careful. As a healer, it is also good advice to kite the spark into puddles that are further away, so that the melee DPS can take the puddles closer to the boss. Finally, Thunder Punch is a tank hit that deals moderate to high amounts of damage, knocking the tank back. If they play well, this is not super dangerous, but if they don't, the tank can get knocked off the platform or be knocked into an electrified puddle. In that event, be ready to emergency heal a DPS player who has aggro, combat res the tank, or if he is stunned inside a puddle, use a displacement spell such as Leap of Faith to get them out of there. After the leaping sparks, the boss cycles back into turbocharge and the sequence repeats until he is defeated. Overall, Floodgate packs a number of difficult healing challenges, and if you're interested in watching my rating of the most difficult healing challenges across all the dungeons, click on this video over here and please drop a like or consider subscribing to my channel for more future content like this. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and see ya.